Hello, Derel. Welcome to the JS Self Care Mind, Body, and Soul podcast. My name is Janelle, and I am the host. This month is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I am super blessed that I have you on my show. Derel, can you please tell us about yourself and the time that you started taking care of your mental health, when your mental health became a priority to you?
Well, thank you so much for having me again, and I really appreciate being on your show. I started to really pay attention to my mental health when the pandemic started, because I realized, how um, difficult it was being, secluded and isolated away from friends and family, and not necessarily going into a job at that point. Um, and just thinking about other people, the kids and stuff. And I said, this must be a traumatic time. Especially if I'm dealing with some things, I know other people are going through some similar things as well. So that's probably around the time when I actually started making it a priority.
So, and also during the pandemic, George Floyd died as well. He was murdered, right?
Yes.
How was you mentally?
Huh. I mean, it was so disturbing. It was so much going on, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and just so much going on. And it started really getting to me. Um, yeah.
So not only were we home, then we witnessed the murder on television. I mean, every channel that we turned to, if we resulted in turning to social media, we saw his death over and over again. And for us in the field, they call that vicarious trauma. We keep seeing the same thing, from Breonna Taylor to George Floyd to Sean Bell to Trayvon Martin, and it to so many people. I could say for me, my mental was surely out of whack at that point because I was told to leave work, come home, sit down, watch TV, and the television was only showing me this murder. We went home in March, and then this happened in May. So it wasn't much time to understand the pandemic before we were hit with something else.
I mean, I think it's something that we were already hit with. We were already, as Black people, in a pandemic before the month of March in 2020. It's a long going pandemic, and it continues. And even the day after Derek Chauvin, the officer that murdered George Floyd, was convicted, not even 8 hours later in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, yet another Black man was executed by the police. And so it's just so much to take in. And so just as a Black man being in America, thinking about these things, seeing my brothers and sisters being murdered, it takes a heavy toll on my mental health. And so that's another thing that really made me, start to really think seriously about it and really, put things into place that were going to be helpful to my mental health.
So, Darrell, if there's anything that you would give another Black man, would you suggest therapy? Any advice that you would suggest for another Black man listening to this podcast?
Absolutely. I mean, we talk to Black men all the time that, that don't necessarily want to express their feelings or talk about these things. And, sometimes we talk to our friends and family members about it, and, they'll be like, oh, you're crazy, or you need church, you need Jesus, all of these different things. Or, man up. I ain't talking about that BS. You know what I mean? And it's just so many stigmas around it. And so I think therapy is a great thing. And I think that you shouldn't necessarily wait until things are going downhill to go to therapy. I think that, therapy is good when you're in the best moment of your life, right? You can go to therapy and talk about all of the great things that are going on. Because once you're in that state of trauma, it's hard to, figure out which direction you want to go into when you have so much going on, so much dysfunction.
I could so agree with you. You grew up in a black two-parent family home. Mom Black, dad Black. How is that when you told them that you were going to get a therapist?
Well, I have a single mom.
Okay, I'm
uh,
sorry.
no, that's fine. But yes, my dad is Black, and
Mm-hmm.
my dad and I are having more and more conversation, and so we talk about these things a bit through text. And so when we see each other, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to elaborate more. But we definitely communicate through text about the things that are going on. in the world. And then my mom and I, we actually live in the same house. And so we talk about these things like every day. And so I watch just like the toll that it takes on her mental health, just having black sons, seeing these things. And, it's kind of like, gives her like flashbacks to when she was growing up, how she experienced racism. And now, she turned 57 years old yesterday, and her first experience with racism is 7 years old. And so 50 years later, we're still going through the same things, if not worse. And now I think it's just been exposed by, the visitor we had in the White House. And now I think that, when we already knew that America was racist, now there is, illustration and, examples to back it up.
Absolutely. So, did your parents say you don't need to go to therapy? I know when I was growing up, we're going in this house, stay in this house. You're going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right. You don't need to go talk to nobody. Did you grow up like that too?
No, so actually,
Lucky you.
there were some people in my family that that would say things like that, but for the most part, my mom, she would take me to. I remember going to like a behavioral health place, talking to counselors and therapists. I have really good support systems at school. All the way up through high school, they used to call me the staff to student coordinator because, when there was an issue, whether it be mentally, physically, or something else going on, I'd not only be representing myself, but every student in the building, when it came to that types of stuff. And so one of the things that we advocated for was having some sort of counseling. And I'm not sure if that ever came to fruition, but I think that excuse me. But I think that I still hold that same, thought. I think that we need more counseling in our schools, and that, our children need to start having therapists as they grow up. And so like, I see politicians all the time talking about, these baby bonds and having all of these things for the kids. And I think that that's awesome. But I think that in addition to these baby bonds, if they're going to do that, right, then what we need to do is make sure our kids have therapists and, in the counseling that they need as they're coming up through their younger lives. A lot of these children have, a lot of trauma at home and a lot of things going on that they may not necessarily know how to deal with. And they can't get up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm gonna go find me a therapist, right? They're just not in a position to do that. And I think that our schools have an obligation to help us meet those needs. We know that a lot of trauma happens, in childhood, and I think
Absolutely.
if I'm not mistaken, between the ages of 3 and 8, is a pretty is at its height, and so we need to have something in place for our kids. And as far as our community, we need to stop, saying those things like, oh, you just need Jesus, you don't need a therapist, blah blah blah, and
Or they're
really,
going to beat it out of you. If
right,
he
right,
just
yeah,
acting up, I'm just going to beat him.
right, and that does nothing but traumatize your child, and then when they grow up, they're gonna beat somebody or beat their kids, and it's just a recurring cycle. And so I think we as a community need to start taking these things, seriously, and talking about these things with our kids, and not necessarily, keeping it away from our kids and, saying it's an adult conversation or stay in a child's place. Like, mental
I
health is a
remember
child's
those
place.
too. I
Right, right.
remember those sayings. Yep, go upstairs. The adults are down here, and
Mm-hmm.
we never were privy to know what was going on. Um, I know my mom. She said she was molested by her uncle, and nothing was ever done.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was ever done. My mother didn't go to therapy or anything. But I
Mm.
remember when my dad was in and out of jail, my mom got me a therapist because I used to protect my dad. And we grew up in the South Bronx, so it was a little hectic, especially during the crack era. And the stuff that we saw during that era was traumatizing within itself.
Right.
I remember one time a man put a gun to my father's head, and I ran in front of the gun. So I've been traumatized
Mm.
for a long time, and that's what made my mother get therapy. But I did grow up with what goes on in this house stays in this house. So we were only privy to tell the therapist certain things.
Right.
So we were trained to train the therapist, I guess you could say, right? But we only
Right.
gonna tell you this because mommy said if we tell you this, we gonna get in trouble.
Right.
So I remember growing up, during that time, and it wasn't easy. It was a lot of traumatic events. As an adult, I changed what went on in my house. I went through a divorce. My son, of course, he saw a therapist. He went to group therapy with children with divorced parents. I'm very open to therapy, and also I have a therapist as well because I am a therapist.
Right.
So, and you have a therapist, right?
Absolutely.
How is therapy going for you as a man? I know you guys don't like to let everything out. Are you vulnerable?
Well, I've had my first session already, and so the next session I think we'll talk a bit more. But the first session was really just kind of introducing myself, giving an overview, and it was a new experience for me. So I think it's going to take some time to to kind of build a rapport with my therapist, and really. I'm sorry, it's very windy in the background. I'm not sure if you heard that.
Yes, it's windy up here too. It's fine.
Yes. But I'm sure we'll, get a little deeper in talking about things. But I gave pretty much an overall uh, outline of my life, and I just look forward to, the sessions from here.
So you're gonna obligate yourself to stay in therapy no matter
Absolutely,
what.
absolutely.
Can you give some advice to Black men who want to go to therapy but are struggling with actually picking up the phone or going online to schedule a session?
Just do it. I mean, the same way if you trip over the sidewalk and hurt your ankle, you're going to call a doctor or go to the hospital. And so it's the same thing with your mental health. It's so important. Just take that first step. It's nothing to it but to do it, but you don't know until you try. And so um, one thing that I did, I thought that it would be pretty important to keep it within my culture so that they would understand. And so I found a Black therapist who happens to be male, which is cool. And I think that we can kind of resonate with each other, a bit more than someone outside of my culture. So I want to just be able to tell my story and not have to explain how things are done in the Black community. So that's one thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is just be vulnerable. Like the things that are on your mind, the things that are on your heart, you got to be able to just go ahead and communicate that, right? You got to be able to let it go. And you're talking to someone that's not going to come back at you with constant rebuttals. You know what I mean? They're just going to listen. And then as time goes on, they'll make their recommendations, for any further care, or if they think that you're in a good spot, then you're in a good spot. But I think that you can always just continue to have a therapist. I know that every therapist has a therapist, right? And including my therapist, he has a therapist as well. And so I think that shows the importance of it. But
It does.
just take the step.
It really does. You said something in the school should be therapy. You also said having someone that looks like you so you don't have to explain your culture to them. Would you also feel that the therapists in the schools, because I know you're a teacher, you're an instructor, do you strongly suggest, should I say, that the therapists look like the population in the
Absolutely.
schools?
Absolutely. Not only that, therapists, I think that the teachers and the administration as well, because I think you need to be able to understand where some of these children come from. And so in life, we meet people where they are. And so I think we need to start that in our schools. We know that our school system is broken, terribly. Um,
Absolutely.
not only is there no mental health, but there's no life skills. And so we're setting our kids up for failure. They're going through all of this trauma, at home and school, and then eventually, at work and in life. And so if we really want to do something for our kids, we'll put this in place to make sure that they're mentally right before they get into the real world. I think that there's lots of great programs, and even our former First Lady Michelle Obama had the program to help our kids get fit and stay in shape. But I think that's great, but we have to also pay attention to the mental health of our kids.
Absolutely. And I live in a predominantly white community, and the therapist doesn't look like my son. Um, and he struggled with that, especially because he's a boy. Boys like, I'm not telling you nothing.
Right.
You ain't going to take me from my mother. And that's how they look at therapists in the school. Like, you going to call in a case of CPS or DSS is going to be at my door, because the children fear that as well.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
our children, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I think that comes down to education. I think that we need to make sure that our kids understand that when they go to therapy, it's just between them and the therapist, right? They shouldn't fear the notion of retribution or feeling like when they leave out of there, they're going to go home and get the behind whoop. They'll have to stand in the corner, or that they'll be taken by Child Protective Services, or you know what I mean.
Right.
They should they should have that understanding that hey, this is just your opportunity to talk about what's on your mind and know that it's not going to come back.
So true. So you have a club on Clubhouse called Mental Health in the Black Community. What prompted you to create a club like that with a title like that?
So there is a club that's not my club. There's I have a room. Our club is Free Thought.
So I apologize.
No, that's
Yes.
okay. So our club is Free Thought, and in that club, I do a room called Mental Health in the Black Community. And the reason I started that room is because as I maneuvered through Clubhouse and looked for different mental health spaces, I noticed that all of them that I went into, there weren't a whole lot of people that looked like me. And so I said, well, mental health is important for us too. Where is everybody? Why aren't we making this, an issue? Like it's a stigma in our community. Why aren't we talking about it? And so I had some other friends on Clubhouse, and I said, let's why don't we have a conversation about it and see who shows up and go from there. And so we started a conversation, and it was supposed to go for 1 hour. And to be honest with you, I said we need a little clickbait, and so I named it Mental Health in the Black Community because I said this will attract Black people. And we started it as a 1 hour conversation, and it went, I think, about 8 or 9 hours. And so from there, we said we're going to do this every single week now at the same time. And so this week will be our 22nd week that we've been having a conversation, and every week it's a different topic, and we're just talking about the things that are going on in our heads, right? The issues that are in our communities, the school to prison pipeline, depression and anxiety, narcissistic relationships, all of these different things that are, just traumatizing us in our community and eventually rolling down to our kids. And so I said, we need to center this and we need to get people engaged, get people involved in talking about this. And I think we've done pretty good over the last 21 weeks.
Yes, that's where I met you at. And I found it to be so awesome because I did grow up in the urban community as well in the South Bronx. And your room is the first room that I ever, and I'm in my 40s, ever heard about mental health in the Black community. There is no programs in the state of New York where I live. I don't know about your state, but there's nothing saying mental health in the Black community. Nothing. I never
Nope.
saw a flyer. I never saw anything. Your room was the very first room I've ever been in the forum anywhere where black black people's mental health is so important.
Right. Sad.
Yes, very sad. Have you, and I know you live across the state from me, you live in Jersey, do you see any mental health in the Black community, any programs, anything?
Did you get another stimulus check this morning?
I guess not.
Oh,
No, but
okay.
I'll check the mailbox. And that's sad to say. Like, we getting more stimulus check than more money and stimulus money than actually more publicized, like on social media, everywhere. Take care of your mental health.
Right. And
We
and
don't see it.
no, in fact, most often politicians take money out of it and reallocate it in other places. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I think that, especially in a time in the middle of a pandemic, we know that when the pandemic first started, and it continues, by the way, people are losing their jobs left and right. And so if you have, if you're working a full-time job and you have health benefits and you're, using your health benefits to see your therapist and so on and so forth, and then one day you walk into a pink slip, you might see your therapist one or two other times before that 30-day period runs out to where you have no health insurance anymore. And so there are programs that we should be focused on, like Medicare or Medicaid for all, to ensure that people are, insured so that they can focus on things like their mental health and, focus on the care that they need. when it comes to anything around that. And so I think that we got a lot of work to do as a country, but we also have a lot of work to do as a community.
And we could start as a community because that's smaller. And
Absolutely.
then we could get bigger. I'm glad you said that because people can't take care of their mental health. To see a therapist, it's a lot of money if you don't have insurance.
Absolutely.
So that's another barrier. All we see is barriers when it comes to taking care of ourselves. But we see commercials from hospitals who now are just huge businesses. You don't even know your nurse anymore. I remember
Hmm.
growing up, you get a lollipop from the nurse. The nurse
Mm-hmm.
was like your best friend. Everything is so business orientated that they promote us to go to the doctor, but they don't promote us to take care of our mental health.
Right. It's a system of money. As long as the money is being circulated, that's all that matters.
And that's why I became an advocate for mental health. I became a life coach because then it's if you're a therapist in this state, you can't help nobody in Jersey, or if you're a therapist in Jersey, you can't help nobody in New York.
Right.
So you see, it's so many barriers when you think about it.
Like
So then,
mental health has different, like mental health has a jurisdiction.
absolutely, it does.
It's
That's a good way to
craziness.
call it. That's a great topic for your room, but it does. Because I can't come to you and say I'm a social worker, but I most definitely could come to you and say I'm a life coach.
Right.
And then the mental health professions is like they don't like us life coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like people need to get therapy, but there's no insurance.
Right.
They don't
Right.
have insurance. They can't afford your $200 an hour bill.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? They result in reaching out to life coaches and like I could spend this amount and take care of my mental health.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I most definitely struggle with that because you only could do this in New York. You can't do this here. You can't do that there. It's like everywhere is a barrier. No educate. You can get educated, but we're not going to tell you about black folk.
Mm-hmm.
You can get educated, but we're not going to put a black therapist in your school. So she becomes a paper pusher because nobody's sitting down with her.
Right.
So it's really, really hard. Derel, what do you do to help people? Like, I know you have another job other than the free thought room.
So, while I'm an educator full time, I work with adults that are looking to return to the workforce. And I also am a consultant. So I've worked in politics for the last 17 years, everything from field work to actually being the campaign manager. Um, and so, besides the community work that I do, um, one of the other things that I do is, just help marketing for small businesses and political campaigns within Free Thought. We just have a lot of things going on. We have some things coming up that are going to be some community programs centered around these types of issues, helping our youth, and really just encouraging and inspiring. But, we do it all. We got graphics going, consulting, and a little bit of everything.
So politics. What put you in that field?
Uh, a number of different things. I think not only seeing 9/11 live on TV in 10th grade history class, but also seeing President George Bush at that time send us off to war. And I didn't really understand, and at the time I'm like, well, why are buildings being blown up, and why are we going to war? And so I just started paying attention to national politics, but then I said, well, what's going on locally? And as I became more educated locally, I started to reach out. Ended up securing an internship in the governor's office and on the governor's first campaign, and it's been just off from there. I mean, I've run campaigns, I've run field programs, I've hosted trainings, and just so much more within politics. But I just like to know what's going on. The types of things that are being proposed. How people are moving, and so I decided to get involved and be a part of the change. And I support candidates that I really believe that are going to do the right thing and keep our issues important. Those issues being, mental health and education, so on and so forth. There's so many other things, but those two issues are top for me.
Absolutely.
And just making sure that when they, get these positions that they're, not being, that they're not focused on self-interest, but they're focused on the interest of the people.
So true. I believe, and I'm glad you put them both there because now you just, made a light bulb go off. If we take care of our mental health and we get the proper education that we need to succeed in life, and we're not so focused on World War II and World War I, those things that are not relevant in this 21st century,
Right.
I feel this would be a better world. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Absolutely, right? People just need opportunity. And so, those two things, like I said, go hand in hand. We need to improve our education system. We need to tell our kids the truth.
Mhm.
I think that
Mhm.
the way we're teaching now, it contributes to racism, when we're only telling one side of the story.
Absolutely.
When we're saying things like Christopher Columbus found America, and if there were people here when you got here, you didn't find it, right?
So
and
true.
and so we need to stop lying to our kids. We need to tell the truth. We need to, make sure that our kids understand that there was more than just Martin Luther King and Malcolm X,
Yep.
right?
That's all we learn in school. Nobody else.
Right, right. There's so much more, right? We need to talk about all of the other pioneers that fought for our liberty and our justice, and also explain to our kids that while they fought for our liberty and justice so long ago, we still don't have liberty and justice. And so, if we continue down the path we are on, we'll continue to have the same things that we're getting. And so that's insanity, right? Continuing to do the same things over and over again, expecting a different result.
So
And
true.
throwing money at it is not the way to solve it. If you're going to throw money at it, throw money into mental health services, right? We offer all of these different things in this country, and not one of them is centered around mental health. And that's an issue. That's an
Mhm.
issue. I don't know what the fix is, but I know that we need to stop taking money out of it,
Yeah.
and just help people.
So true. And I remember taking we used to call them RCTs, where you have to take these RCTs in high school to graduate, state tests. And one of the questions would always be who discovered America. And if you didn't write Christopher Columbus, you did not get that answer correct. You just didn't.
And you see, if I can remember correctly, I believe the answer to that question, or a similar question, I think it was back like in middle school. I think I wrote something like the Indians.
Crispus
I,
Attucks.
I think,
I learned about Crispus Attucks. Really, he was an Indian, so you couldn't
yeah.
write that. Did
Well,
you get it right? Did
I
you?
probably not, but but I definitely wrote that. Yeah, I mean it's crazy to me. It really is crazy to me. It's kind of like me stumbling upon your show. Like if it's like me sending this recording out and saying, "Hey, this is my podcast." You know what I mean? Like
So true.
JS had it first, like, and but this country was founded off of violence and lies, and we are just in a place where we either sink or swim. And I think that by swimming, we need to, that's improving our systems, stopping the lies and just getting people back to a place where we can actually believe the fact that we've been created equally, and not it just being an illusion.
So true. And everybody should believe it because we were created equally. A mother and a father went to bed. I mean, as the show where I came from, because I asked my mother, she went and bought a VHS tape, and oh, you see mommy and daddy laying in bed. A cartoon character. And of course, it wasn't two black people my mom got, so it was two white people, cartoon
Mm-hmm.
characters laying in the bed because and it was, where did I come from? And then voila, a baby, right?
Right.
And we're born not knowing about racism. You do know that. We're born innocent.
Right.
It's a
Right.
learned behavior. You don't
Absolutely.
wake up and say, I'm going to hate white people or I'm going to hate black people. That's not how it works. You're taught that.
Right. But I mean, but when you grow up in a society and everything around you is just one way, right? You kind of get used to that way, right? And then as you open your eyes and you realize what's happening around you, I think that's when and you start to get called names in school and people start to talk about these things. I think that's kind of when you realize it. But I think we're in a place now where, society has become semi-sensitive. Right. Me growing up, I just, especially at this moment, I can't remember, seeing any cartoons with people that look like me. Right.
Yeah.
And so now we have like the Proud Family, and we have all of these different
I think the
cartoons.
Cosbys was like the first.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
The
mean,
Cosbys, what was it? What it was another one I can't think, but with Janet Jackson in it. But we didn't see much of it.
yeah. And so like things like that, are starting to change. But then when you really look at at the bottom line of it, you're like, okay, like this is performative, right? Like this is performative. Like you're doing all of these things, right? You're putting these black people in these places and these positions. You're putting these black faces on TV and so on and so forth. But the policy isn't reflecting it. And so
Absolutely.
we can do all of those performative things, but at the end of the day, there's no work actually being done, and that's the problem.
So true. And that's why I said it has to start in communities. And the show, I just thought of it. Remember Different Strokes, where this white man adopted these two black kids from Harlem.
Yep. Yep.
And that was them trying to show, see, we like black people. And we bringing these two kids and we're going to foster them. But their mother was his mate. Think about it. Their mother was his mate. Yeah. So it's not like he really went out and said, okay, I'm going to adopt these people. And then people started going to Africa and white people started adopting the black people. Like, we love you guys too, but be genuine about it. And I can say that during the George Floyd thing and stuff, my neighbors are white. And do you know, I respect them so much. They came over to me. They said, Janelle, are you all right? Because I'm outside cussing and all type of stuff. It's May, so it's hot outside. And they was like, we don't know what to say, but we want you to know that we don't stand with white supremacy.
Right.
And when they just said, we don't know what to say, that's the best thing to say. Just don't go around. I got a black friend. I don't want to hear that right about now. I don't want to hear that. But I don't know what to say. I'm glad you don't know what to say, because not saying anything in my book. If you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. Right. Especially at a time like this when we're heightened. I know a lot of people are angry because the children are not sitting down. They're going out there, they're rioting and they're looting and they're fighting for what's right. And if we didn't have those riots for George Floyd, I don't believe that we would have got justice.
No. I think that, people had to stand up and say, we're not going to continue to deal with this. We're not going to take this. We're not going to continue to be kicked when we're down. Enough is enough. And I think that we needed this generation to come in and, and be a part of this change and, really just show up and show out. And so while many may not agree with the way it was done, you got to understand that, if you continue to kick a dog's going to bite you.
Absolutely.
Right.
And absolutely.
And so you can't tell people how to express their hurt, their pain, their anger. You can't tell people how to express their trauma. People are just going to react the way they react. And I think that while we're on the topic of, the people protesting for George Floyd, when you're met with, pepper spray and batons and rubber bullets and, a whole bunch of other things, it just doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it easier. In fact, it traumatizes people more. And so, it's just a lot.
It is. And that's why mental health, I brought up the George Floyd and all that because we were re-triggered too many daggone times. I mean, the 15-year-old girl, she out stabbing, shooting. And we need people to take care of their mental health.
Absolutely. And so I want to say real quick, I know that that Canada, as well as New York, believe it or not, and I don't know if you learned about it. It just happened like maybe a day or two ago, where it was announced that they're going to not be responding to mental health calls. Instead, they're going to have a team of specialists go out and deal with it. And so I think
I hope that team of specialists, Derel, look like the community.
Absolutely. And so that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say that, I hope that we were given opportunity to be on that team because, we need counseling, we need therapy, we need help in our communities.
And
And
more
so,
people will be alive.
absolutely. I mean, there was a report or a special that I came across that said about that people with mental illness were 16% more likely, or 16 times more likely to be killed by the police. And so that is an issue that shows that we need another way of dealing with it. We
Mm-hmm.
can't just hop out of the car with a gun because somebody's standing there
With
with
a
a
knife.
knife. Or even a situation that just happened in Virginia. The officer shot, I believe his last name is Brown, Mr. Brown, and killed him. But right before he was shot and killed, the officer said he has a gun to his head. And so he has a gun to his head. So now we pump him with 7 bullets. That is a
Mm.
problem. That's a problem.
Yes, because he
What?
was committing suicide.
Right,
He was
but
committing suicide, a mental health issue.
right, but check this out. It wasn't even a gun. It turned out to be a cordless phone.
Oh my
It turned
goodness.
out to be a cordless phone. And so, like, when you're jumping out and you're screaming and hollering. I don't want to curse and repeat what he said, but
Mm-hmm.
get the F on the ground. Show me F in hand. You're screaming and hollering. You got to understand, when someone's in a state of mental trauma, you can't get out and start screaming and hollering and pulling guns on them. Like, you don't. You have
Absolutely.
to assess and understand the situation, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, and like I said, even if there was a gun to this man's head, like, he has it to his head. He doesn't have it to nobody else's head. You don't have to shoot him 7 times. And there's a bunch of different things and a bunch of different processes that are in place to help. And so, where's the negotiation team when they're needed, right?
Yeah.
Where are these types of things at?
And
Obviously, there's a state of trauma going on.
mm-hmm. And you say he had a cordless phone to his head.
Cordless
So
phone,
that tells you that the intent, he was thinking about doing something to himself, but he didn't even have the right weapon
right?
to commit suicide. And that is where police shouldn't have been called. If they were called, they needed to stand back and let the professionals that look like him handle it,
Right.
because that's going to be another barrier that we have. We're putting these professionals in these communities. They have to look like the community. And you can find a professional that grew up in the community.
Man, half the politicians don't even look like the community, and so that's another problem. And
Absolutely.
it's not that they even necessarily have to, because all skin folk ain't your kinfolk, and we know
True.
that. But
That's true
we
too.
just we need we need education in our communities, and so I think it's just up to us. I don't think that we're gonna get that just waiting on anybody else to do it for us. So I think that part is on us. Um,
Absolutely. We got to do the work.
Right, but we need to also fight for the resources to be able to do the work, right?
Absolutely.
Other communities are getting resources for the things that they need, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's about time we get our fair share as well.
Yeah. I say, if you're going to give this school $1 million, for me up here, Newburgh would be like our ghetto school. So you should give Newburgh $1 million.
Right,
Whatever you
absolutely,
give, everything should be fair across the board.
absolutely.
I don't care how much taxes you got to pay to live. I don't care. If we're talking about educating the babies, let's keep it fair across the board.
Well, here's the thing with that. Um, I got one better for you. Let's stop running our school systems off of property taxes and find another way to fund it. Let's run something
Mm-hmm.
else off of property taxes, right? Let's run the pensions and benefits of the politicians off of property taxes
Oh, that would
instead
be
of our
great.
education system, because that's why our kids are being underserved and not served,
And
right? Because
educated.
if you're running off of property taxes and you've already redlined and blockbusted us out of communities, then how do you expect us to be able to fund our schools? We can't. And so that's why schools in the inner cities look the way they do. They're run the way they are. They're overpopulated, understaffed, because of these types of things. So let's run your benefits and your pensions and everything that you're collecting from the government off of the property taxes of the American people and see how that works out.
Mm, I like that. I really do, because we're about educating and taking care of this mental health. I I'm gonna leave this podcast with this, and I want you to give some advice as well. Um, we need anybody listening to this particular episode. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I am here to advocate and educate you guys on the importance of mental health. And every week, I'm going to try to have a male on so that we can encourage our young Black men to get the help that they need. And it's not a handout. I'm talking about help and taking care of yourself in a loving way. Have someone to talk to. Have a therapist, a counselor, a life coach, whatever it is you need in your back pocket, because you cannot pour out to everybody and everybody don't pour into you. You need to address what's going on and talk about it. Talk about the trauma that you're seeing. It's every week, it's every month someone's getting killed by the police. It's every day. It's being uneducated, losing our jobs. You mean to tell me that you don't need to check your mental health? Absolutely. Check it. Hire a therapist. What would you leave this podcast with, Derel?
Your story might save someone's life.
Mm.
And so as we continue to hold on to these things and suffer with these things and not talk about these things, think about the kids that are looking up to us, right? And set the example for them. Um, don't be necessarily worried about. I always say, don't be so worried about what the outcome looks like. Don't be attached to that. Focus on what you have in the moment, right? Be vulnerable. Go to therapy, right? You can be having the best time of your life again, but go to therapy. Get a therapist if you have the resources. Especially, so many of us don't take advantage of these things when we have the resources, and so there might be that 9 or 10 year old that needs you right now, and if you're not in a good place, you can't be there for them. So please definitely take advantage of therapy, take advantage of support groups and so much more when it comes to your mental health.
So true, Darrell. And for those that's interested in politics, education, I will have Darrell's contact information in the show notes, because I need you guys to also connect with Darrell. Have your little boys connect with Darrell. If you're going through something, connect with him, and he'll tell you his story about his struggles with just hiring a therapist that looks like him. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode. I hope something resonates with you and you take control of your life and you hire a therapist. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us.